BOGO Beans, welcome back. I'm Roedah.
And I'm Nour, and this is Chapters Chitchat, your weekly excuse to overanalyze a single sentence for 20 minutes.
Every week, we read excerpts from books that make us spiral, in a good way.
Whether it's poetic, unhinged, or just plain confusing, we're diving in with ratings, outrageous explanations, and the occasional existential crisis.
This isn't your English lit class. It's deeper, messier, but a lot more fun.
So grab your emotional support beverage. We're drinking strawberry mint ginger. Hers has ginger in it. Mine doesn't. Strawberry mint tea.
Mm-hmm. Get cozy and let's crack open a chapter.
Yeah.
This is Chapters Chitchat. So today we are deep diving into the world of Colleen Hoover. I haven't actually read anything by her, but we watched It Ends With Us, did extensive research, watched a lot of other people talk about her, hate on her and her writing, and the story, and we have our own opinions too.
Before we get into the quotes and the chaos, let's give you all some background, because It Ends With Us is kind of a cultural moment, whether we like it or not.
It was published in 2016 by Colleen Hoover, a self-published author turned romance reigning online queen. And then in 2022 and 2023, BookTok made her books explode. So we're talking millions of sales, people sobbing in their car on TikTok, a movie adaptation starring Blake Lively that was just released last year.
The book follows Lily Blossom Bloom, yeah, that's her real name, a 20-something-year-old woman who moves to Boston to start a flower shop after her abusive father dies. She's dealing with a lot of internalized trauma from growing up watching her mother be abused, and she's trying to carve out a better life for herself.
Then she meets Ryle Kincaid, a successful neurosurgeon who's emotionally unavailable and problematic when you get past the layers, but not enough to stop them from falling into a whirlwind relationship. So at first, it seems like a love story with just enough edge.
But things get dark fast. Ryle starts showing violent and controlling behavior, and Lily's trauma starts resurfacing. And just as she's navigating this, her childhood love, Atlas, who once protected her from her abusive home, reappears in her life.
The book becomes this intense emotional tug of war between her past and present, her survival, and these ideas of romance, trauma, and hope. And while it really tries to address domestic abuse in a more serious way, the execution has been a little controversial. Yeah.
Some readers say that it's raw and healing. Others say it's romanticized trauma bait with a pretty font. So, of course, we had to read it. I actually did read it back when it was really popular. I actually did like it. I've grown since.
I'm sorry, Coho, I'm not reading your stuff. Okay, we've gathered some of the juiciest quotes to discuss with you all. The first one goes like this. There is no such thing as bad people. We're all just people who sometimes do bad things.
This quote feels like an Instagram caption that should have stayed in the draft. It's giving abuse is just a misunderstanding.
I hope no one cuts that out of the video and posts it like, this is what Nour said.
Honestly, give them ideas, please.
Don't do that. What's interesting here is I've heard people say this to make excuses for the people who have hurt them when they want to retain a relationship. Like, no, I don't believe that he's actually bad. He just did something bad. And I to some degree agree that your actions don't define you per se, but they do speak volumes of your values when you repeat them and you don't try to make amends and you don't try to change. Change is hard. Mm-hmm. Change is not linear. Progress isn't linear. And so it can take time. It can take a lot of effort. There are setbacks. There's repetition of the same mistakes. But if you're constantly like working at it, that makes a really big difference. That in and of itself tells me you're not a bad person, but you have made mistakes. On the flip side, if you are making mistakes, if you're hurting people intentionally, intention also plays into this. If you're doing things that are quote unquote bad and you're making excuses for it, you're not trying to make up for the implications or the impacts of your actions, regardless of your intention. If you don't own up to it and are accountable for how you harm others, how are you not bad? Oh.
Yeah, I agree that it gets to a certain point where a repeated offense, like if you're doing more bad than you are good, does that not make you a bad person?
Like, I have a hard time with black and white. I've told you this, like black and white dichotomies. Because, yeah, actually, humans are not 100% one or the other, and our actions don't dictate us, because in that moment of committing that action, does that speak to your entire life, your entire persona, your entire being? I don't know, because there's so many different things, different types of actions we could be discussing, minor ones, major ones. But when it comes to abuse specifically, abuse is never excusable. Abuse is never not bad.
Okay.
So if we're making it about that.
I withdraw my statement. I mean, who am I to judge whether someone's good or bad based off of...
But you were saying, like, the action is definitely...
Right. But even if the action is repeated, who am I to claim or judge if someone's a good or bad person? Because you only see so much on the outside.
So it's more like you're saying, okay, maybe this person is not good for... So, okay, for example, in the situation, we've already given you the premise. We know Ryle becomes abusive against Lily, and there are multiple instances of that happening. You're saying you wouldn't necessarily say Ryle's a bad person, period, but you would say Ryle is really bad for Lily.
Yes, I think that's what I was
and he's not good in this relationship.
When you read the book, he repeatedly
hurts her.
Yeah. And just like displays abusive behavior, which actually brings us to our next quote. It goes, "I'm sorry, Lily," he says, Ryle, "but please don't tempt me right now. I'm trying really hard not to hit something."
Okay, so context. Lily and Ryle are in some sort of a heated moment. There's tension, and he's already shown some signs of aggression. He's trying to pull himself back together, rein himself in, not let the beast out. But clearly he's still putting blame on her by saying, like, if you tempt me, then I'll hurt you.
Yeah.
Meaning you're the reason I hurt you. And this is after one of the very first physical incidents, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I think that this line really walks the razor thin edge between showing a man trying to control violent impulses and romanticizing the idea that a woman's behavior can tempt a man towards violence.
It also just romanticizes the idea that someone who has abusive tendencies can control themselves. Like, if you know they're abusive, just because they tried to exercise control doesn't necessarily mean you should still stay.
I also really dislike the way this is written. Like, the way he's like, don't tempt me. It's almost written in a seductive way.
It glorifies it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's intentional. Maybe it's unintentional, but it glorifies the behavior. And it's regardless of whether or not he's trying to exercise control, it's an unhealthy behavior to be in. It's not a cycle that it's not a cycle to want to find yourself in. So I don't know, I guess in your opinion, what happens when this sort of like passionate toxicity is packaged as like commendable in romance or literature? I don't read a lot of romance, so I don't encounter this as often.
I think it just puts the wrong impression on what love and romance and care should be, especially when younger people are reading these types of books. So I was pretty young when I read this. It came out like 2021?
2016.
Wow. Okay. I didn't read it then. I think I read it in like 2020, something like that. I didn't see the red flags.
Yeah.
I didn't read these as like that line. I would have just been like, oh, he's
trying so hard to be better for her.
He's trying. Yeah. But in reality, like, this type of thinking can really warp your perceptions as a young adult going into adulthood and eventually like wanting to find a person for yourself. Like, this might skew what real love looks like. And I think that's dangerous.
It lowers your standards. It enables accepting behaviors that otherwise shouldn't be accepted. It really does normalize it, just like you said. And the next quote we have speaks to that. It's something that Lily says, and it is, I think that's the hardest part of going through this. You lose yourself. You let someone walk through your soul with dirty feet, and you're so desperate to leave, but you're even more desperate to stay. It's not that simple.
Yeah, so here Lily is reflecting on her mother's decision to stay in an abusive relationship and how complicated that decision actually was now that she's facing something similar.
I feel like this is like one of the few moments, and again, I didn't read the whole book, but this is one of the few moments where we see Colleen Hoover actually slow down, use that social work degree, and like thoughtfully grapple with the psychology of abuse. So many of her books have like toxic behaviors in them, the real messiness of relationships between two humans who are imperfect, right? But this statement is so much more introspective and empathetic. It doesn't glorify the issue. It just plainly displays how difficult it is, especially for the victim of abuse, to be in a situation where they have love for their abuser, they have care for their abuser, they want to make it work. And it's seemingly more and more and more impossible to make it work. It's nestled in a book that only some readers realize contradicts itself by romanticizing the very thing it's critiquing. And that's the only issue I have with it. Like, this statement in and of itself critiques abusive relationships and brings to light how difficult it is for somebody to be in one. But the entirety of the book plays out exactly as that. She's stuck in this cycle.
It just gets so lost between all of the toxicity and affirming the toxicity.
But this one line, I think, is the one time where it shows genuine insight to having a more emotional understanding on what abuse in relationships can do to a person. Right? Sorry. Actually, I have a question for you. So, do you think that a person can lose themselves in a relationship and still be held accountable for their decision to stay?
Like, accountable in what way?
Like, okay, imagine you have a friend who's in an abusive relationship and they recognize that something wrong is happening against them. Right. Whether it's physical and outright or it's emotional abuse, mental abuse, they're being abused in some capacity. And they begin to lose themselves in it. Like, they are sacrificing, cutting slivers of themselves away to fit this mold for this person, to try to please this person, to try to keep this relationship going. And they've lost themselves. They've lost their inner voice. They've lost their own critical thinking because they're only trying to operate in a means of survival within this relationship. So at that point, as they continue to stay, are they still responsible for that decision, or have they just made the decision once and then lost themselves in the midst?
I think it's a difficult question because ideally you would want to take a step back when these things are happening in the beginning. So like, once you start seeing red flags, once you start being treated poorly by your partner, like, you stand up for yourself. You say, hey, I don't like this. I don't like that. I notice you're doing this. Can we talk about it? Can we work through it? Whatever it is. But if you stay silent and you accept that and you continuously keep accepting that, chances are it'll be harder to walk away. And that's why you end up losing your sense of self. So I don't know if I can... I don't know. That's a hard one. I don't think I can place blame on anyone for staying because I've never been in that position. I can only imagine how difficult it is. And then I also think, like, a lot of women, unfortunately, don't grow up realizing their worth. Like, in society, you're put down, you're told to behave a certain way, be obedient, be this, be that, for a man to like you. And so you go into a relationship thinking, like, you already kind of have this fear of, like, I need to be okay with the way he's treating me in order for me to keep this man, right? So, like I'm
nothing without him.
Yeah. And so there's, like, that lack of self-esteem. I don't know. Yeah, I could say. So it's hard. I think I don't know if it's black and white.
I think when you're in an abusive relationship, depending on the circumstances, you could be completely blinded by the other person. They could have warped your entire perception of reality. And I think to some degree you are responsible for your actions. You are responsible for your decision to stay, whether or not you realize that you can leave, but not alone. Like, you have some accountability towards yourself, but taking the entire situation into context is important. And sometimes in these circumstances, people lose the ability to decide for themselves. And so when the only thing that somehow matters is this relationship, that's all you chase. Whether that's because it's what feels like your self-worth is from, or it's because it's the one person who you feel like you can trust and they've abused that trust again and again and made it seem like they're your lifeline, which often happens as well. Whether it's external validation, internal validation, whatever it is, sometimes you don't realize you can leave. And so I agree with you. It's not an easy question to answer.
I do think, though, that in order for things to change, like when you're in really deep in being abused, the only way for things to change is if you speak up.
I know that sometimes, especially when it's physical abuse, the cycle of abuse only gets worse every time. And sometimes people feel silenced because if they speak up, it only gets worse.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's win-win. I'm also not looking to victim blame. I'm just saying it's incredibly nuanced. It's incredibly difficult. It's very gray. And if you are facing any circumstances like this, please seek resources. If you have availability to be able to contact, programs available for help, that sort of thing, you can always research that in Google. But it is important to, if you don't have somebody you can personally rely on, and even then, that's putting someone else in a very difficult position as well. There are resources out there. We can leave a helpline link down below for anyone who is curious. But
what I meant by speak up is not necessarily like, okay, maybe not speak up, but take action, because
like, by speak up, not like speak up to him in his face while he's trying to hit you, but like speak up and like tell someone to get help. Seek out those resources. And in and of itself, like, it can take so many different types of tolls on you to where you feel immobilized, completely paralyzed. So it can be extremely hard. But the minute you're able to see outside that situation is when you realize, okay, things can be different and should be different. But it's validating your checking that sense of reality that you have, that perception you have, and validating that something is wrong. Because I know after a certain point, you just accept everything wrong to be right.
And then I know, like, domestic violence victims are often like, they end up isolated because their abuser doesn't want them to talk to anyone else and have friends and like be made aware that what's happening to them is wrong. But that's why it's so important to keep a social circle around you so that you're constantly in touch with reality and you're able to see more clearly.
Also, like, being in an abusive relationship can really taint how your friendships are. So even when you're trying to keep them for the sake of preserving the relationship, you don't say certain things. You find yourself, not yourself, but like, I've seen this happen, and I've seen people find themselves lying to just kind of survive another day. And then they end up losing, not because their partner has isolated them intentionally, but just because of how they're moving through the world. They lose the trust of everyone else because they're trying to protect something that is ultimately wrong for them. And so it's really difficult. And again, I'm not victim blaming whatsoever. It's just a product of the circumstances. And that I've seen that play out. I've seen that happen. And if you know someone who is in this sort of situation, handle it with a little bit of grace for them. But I don't know. I think it's best to try not to pull away. It's really difficult to see someone suffer in an abusive relationship and to see them go back and then go back and then go back again. And that it's so common.
That's why I'm saying there is no chance for the cycle to stop until the victim reaches out in some way or form.
It's like if you are literally in a cycle of abuse, the only way out is to firmly step out of it. Whether that's physically removing yourself or actually informing somebody else to help you make a plan for
even
action.
if it's a small step, any step
will deviate from it.
It gives you a greater chance of breaking the cycle.
Yeah. I don't think the book really supports this level of emotional honesty around the situation. There's only glimpses, like the line that we just read earlier, wherein we see with clarity to how abuse can affect relationships and people. But
can I read
just all of it so nuanced? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Only because this ties into this. Ryle says, that's his name, right?
Yes. Okay. Girl, you read the book.
In 2020. Okay, Ryle says, I'm not this person, Lily. I'm not.
The whole testification, hold on.
I'm not this person, Lily. I'm not. I've worked so hard to be the opposite of him. I don't want to be like him. I don't want to be this person. But I am. Let's let that sink in for a sec. This is after a violent outburst. He attempts to explain why he snapped, linking his anger to childhood trauma and claiming that he didn't mean to hurt Lily.
I feel like tone matters so much. And if you read it like he's angry with himself, like, I'm not this person, Lily. I'm not, like, he's so upset that he's done this and he wants to change everything. And, you know, I don't know, maybe I would be more inclined to be like, okay, there's a shred of truth in that. Perhaps he's working against it. But then, like, when you read it so flat, that's a psychopath.
Yeah.
I'm not this person.
The psychopath.
This is literally how it was in the movie. I'm not this person, Lily. I'm not. I've worked so hard to be the opposite.
No, dude.
I don't want to be like him.
Whether you're saying it to yourself or someone else, I can't get behind it.
No. It's really ambiguous, honestly. Like, it's an admission of guilt, which is very real. And sure, +1 on that, minus 1,000 on the act of abuse. But it also points to, like, this concept of inherited trauma. Like, he is acting out like who? Like, who is he referring to when he says this? You know, like, I don't want to be like him. Who did he see perform an act of violence that he is now in the back pocket? It is now in his back pocket as if it was second nature. You know what I mean? Like, these are learned behaviors sometimes too. And so, yeah, some readers will see it that way. Some will see it as literally like emotional manipulation. Like, he is lying to you. He's only apologizing, trying to make you feel bad so you stay, even though he did those things. And I think the safest way out of this if this entire situation is for her to just not continue to be with him after that first instance. He needs to learn and fix it and try not to let it happen, because the minute you allow for it to happen, it continues to repeat.
Right.
And whether it's emotional manipulation or an admission of guilt, the wrong was still done.
I can tell you my firsthand experience reading this 5 years ago as a late teen. I didn't read a lot of the red flags. I didn't read into them. And I was still able to romanticize
the romance.
Yeah. The romance. I was like, oh, he's trying to change. Now, towards the end of the book, I changed my mind. But as I was reading, I was like, okay, but he's trying. Like, it's written in a way where my teenage self felt like, okay, he can be better though. And like, I was almost rooting for him. But Yeah, I think that's why.
There's a trope. I can't think of it, but there's a trope around that where it's like the I can fix him trope.
Yeah, that's what it is. Now, as an adult, I know that people can't be fixed unless they want to fix themselves.
I do think that it's a very nuanced portrayal of what an abusive person can look like, especially with the ideas of like inheriting trauma and repeating cycles of abuse that you learned or witnessed. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but there's a lot of factors that can amount to it taking place. But if Hoover hadn't written him as like quote unquote charming or conventionally attractive or successful, people wouldn't root for him. People wouldn't root for the romance. People would be quick to chastise, put him on the cross. People are often willing to overlook someone's wrongdoings when that person is conventionally successful, conventionally attractive, likable, well-liked, has a good reputation, is charming. No matter the truth in the dirty, the ugly, the bad, the harm that they cause.
I was watching this video. Okay, this isn't the exact same thing, but this one girl was talking about how her personality and her behaviors would be considered weird if she wasn't pretty, because she was saying that when she was young, she was like shunned, outcasted for being herself because she wasn't as attractive. Like she grew into her looks, and now like being
she's
older,
quirky. It's cute. Yeah, that's a thing. That's really a thing. I think it's a sad product of pretty privilege. Honestly.
Okay, our next quote is, "You were my favorite person, Lily." Should I read it in a guy's voice? "You were my favorite person, Lily. And when I think about my life, I want to cry. Because you were the only good thing in it. You were the only one who helped me. You saved my life."
He needs help.
Yeah. So this is in one of Lily's diary entries from her teen years. She recounts a letter, Atlas. Now, this is Atlas. This is her childhood beau. Yeah, boo thing. She recounts a letter Atlas left for her after they were separated. It's meant to be vulnerable and heartfelt, a declaration of how much she meant to him when he had nothing.
Okay.
So fans swooned over this. It's raw, romantic, and dramatic, but others critiqued it for idolizing Lily to a fault and making her emotional caretaker of a boy in crisis. It also, like, some people saw it counting as trauma bonding instead of love.
No, it's literally equating trauma bonding to love. Is this even trauma bond though? Because isn't a trauma bond when you develop, it's not when you go through trauma together, it's when you fall for the person who it's
Is going through trauma.
No, it's between the person and their abuser. So she has a trauma bond with Ryle.
No. But you can also trauma bond with people who went through trauma. Like if you've gone through traumatic things and someone else has too, you guys can both like form a connection.
But that's not
like
a trauma bond.
Really?
A trauma bond is a development out of a repeated cycle of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement.
But I've heard people talk about like trauma bonding.
That's social media trauma bond.
I need to check.
Get yourself a copy of the DSMV. No, I understand what you mean though. They are bonded because of trauma. It's not necessarily shared trauma either, but it is a codependent relationship. She becomes his caretaker through whatever hardship he has gone through, and as a result, he puts her on a pedestal. He makes her or sees her as his savior. I don't think Hoover is necessarily the one idealizing her. I think she, through this like letter that's written in Atlas's voice, is showing how an unhealthy dynamic can come from that.
Yeah, I don't put this one on Hoover. Not this one.
But I do think where her responsibility comes in is stories like this really do shape our ideas and visions of love, especially on the young and impressionable. And in that case, normalizing this idea of you can save someone from their hardship and their struggles and their traumas, rather than, you know, yes, you're there for them, but you're helping them find resources and they're responsible for their own lives. You're not responsible for their healing. That's a really important distinction to make, and that's not made here. So where she is responsible with that social work degree and public voice, I think that's the nuance that's really missing, but it's nuance that holds a lot of integrity and worth in defining what healthy relationships look like and what types of relationships to go for. Difficult. Well, thank you.
Okay, up next. So that is all of our discussions and quotes from the book. We're going to lighten it up a little bit and play green flag or gaslight. So we're going to be taking moments from the book and asking if this is a healthy relationship moment or emotional manipulation dressed in a pretty trench coat.
More like an ugly crop top covered by a really, really baggy open dress shirt with tattered ends, bro.
And a beanie on top.
Oh my God, and uncombed hair. Girl, what are you doing with that shampoo line of yours? Come on.
No, not the shampoo.
All right, yes, let's start.
Okay.
So what's the first thing?
So Ryle goes, I don't want to be that kind of man. Green flag or gaslight? Is he owning his flaws or just giving excuses?
I don't have enough context when he said this.
Choose one anyway.
Okay, if nothing ever happened and they're talking about it. Okay, see, the thing is, in real life, if this was said and the circumstances are as follows, they see some abuse happening. The guy goes, I don't want to be that kind of guy. And he's just like literally like disgusted by it. Okay, green flag.
Right.
If he already did something and he's like, but I don't want to be that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Red flag.
Yeah.
I see it happening though. Like they've made a mistake. They want to change. If it's the first incident and, you know, with all intents and purposes, you've actually wanted to work together to fix things, perhaps it's both an admission of guilt and a truthful intent to improve, but dangerous thin line. All right. The next one is from Lily. She stays with Ryle despite his violent behavior because she believes, and I quote, love can fix this. Green light or gaslight? Is this hopeful, resilient, or dangerous denial?
Based off of the story, dangerous denial. But in real life application, I think it can be a yellow flag because it can be fixed, but not through love. It can be fixed through therapy. It can be fixed through accountability. It can be fixed through
prison time.
There we go. Exactly. So yeah, I give it an in between. Up next, Atlas shows up suddenly, expecting Lily to drop everything and rekindle their past romance.
Is that really how it happened?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Theoretically.
Gaslight. That's emotional pressure based off of some TikTok trauma bonds and a weird expectation for her to continue to save you or to be there for you and to hold your weight. No. Okay, next one is Ryle gets angry and lashes out physically, but then immediately apologizes with intense affection to follow. Ooh. Affection in bold.
Gaslight. I get angry when people do this in real life. Like, if you've done me wrong and you try to... What's the word? There's a word for it. Not sugarcoat, but like
love bomb.
Yeah, is it love bombing though?
Love bombing happens at the beginning of a relationship or after a mistake is made, but usually at the beginning of a relationship.
Yeah, like if you try to love bomb me, if you do something wrong, I'd rather you apologize and we act normal instead of you apologizing and giving me 10 gifts and writing me 8 letters and kissing my scratch that.
Kiss your toes, good night every time.
You know what I mean? But like even in friendships, like we all make mistakes, but just apologize, own up to it, and then move forward. I don't like the intense affection bullshit.
Yeah, I think the healthy way when a mistake is made is to apologize, own it. Maybe you want to make up for it in one gesture.
Right. But not like
in excess is just a show.
Exactly. And you're trying to make yourself feel better more than the other person.
Or make the other person feel bad because now you feel so bad that you hurt them. That doesn't make sense.
Making it about yourself.
Yeah. It's the classic abuse cycle, honestly. Yeah. And then the worst thing though is when you make a mistake and then the other person, it's so normalized that people think that when somebody is wrong, they should be treated that way. They should be put on a pedestal by the person who accidentally hurt them or whatever and be given gift after gift after gift. Don't accept his apology until he's done X, Y, Z. That is also normalized. So
I have a whole problem
conversation
with gift giving culture.
I know. Okay, so the next one is Atlas refers to Lily as my favorite person. It implies that her worth is tied to him saving her in doing so. Is this a green flag or is this gaslighting? Is this wholesome or is this emotional codependency?
Is tied to him saving.
To her saving him, sorry. To her saving him.
Wow, I don't remember this being said like this in the book. If he really is just saying that she's his favorite person, I think it's wholesome. But if he did imply that her worth is tied to him saving,
I don't have the whole quote. Sorry, I feel like the whole quote would change it maybe, but
well, it would be emotional codependency if he's implying her worth is tied to him saving her.
Should we skip that one?
Actually, that's just crazy. Yeah.
Skip it. Okay. Okay, here. Do you think this is a green light or is a red or a green flag, red flag, whatever we're doing? Is this good or bad? Okay. Lily keeps on trying to fix Ryle instead of just leaving. Like she keeps trying to work on his anger, give him more chances. Is that like strength on her part or is it self-sacrifice in the wrong way?
I think in real life, it could be okay if he's also fixing, like if she's being patient throughout the process of him actively fixing himself. So like going to therapy, getting help. If she's patient with that, that's her choice. I respect that. If she's just allowing herself to be stepped on by him continuously and he's not actively seeking any outside help, then no, I think it's a red flag.
Okay.
If Atlas pushes Lily to confront her trauma, but respects her timing, is it supportive or pressuring?
With the caveat of respecting her timing, it may come off pushy, but ultimately seems more supportive, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was a little bit of
a lot.
Our spiral on It Ends With Us. It was also really just a cultural moment because of all the lawsuits around it.
Definitely. But I also think considering all of the books that have ever been written, there is so much worse out there. I don't know why this one got
so much heat.
Yeah. But yeah, let us know your thoughts down below.
If there's something you would like for us to read, deep dive into, think about, spiral over, if you have a hot take that's literary in nature, drop it down below. We take all your recommendations. We'll sift through them. Give them a quick look. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, BOGO Beans.